Hi, welcome to the Blueprints to Buildings podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer, and on the show, we interview the movers and shakers in the world of property development and real estate. Now, before we dive in, very quick word this show is brought to you by a new visual technology that is quietly making waves in the property industry. Developers are using it to cut design costs, accelerate off plan sales in ways that sound almost too good to be true. If you're curious, message me directly at Glen Palmer Secure or check out the show notes below. So, on today's episode, I'm joined by Jeff Heymann. He's a building envelope heavyweight and is the driving force behind Island Facades, known for scaling marketing share, tightening best practice, and delivering consistent facade projects across the board. I've seen some of the work on Island Facades, and what they've done on commercial buildings is extremely impressive. Jeff, thank you very much for taking time out to have this show with me. Really appreciate it. I know you're really busy, so let's dive in, shall we?
Pleasure to join you, Glenn. Yes.
So, Jeff, first question. If time travel became a reality, you had a chance to go back in time to who you were when you first started your career, what advice would the person you are now tell your younger self?
Stay in law school. So I'm just kidding.
I like it.
No, I've been fortunate throughout my career, Glenn, that I've had mentors that afforded me the opportunity to learn the business from a lot of different areas. So I would tell anybody, whether it was myself or a younger person, that to learn all aspects of the business that you're in. And this obviously goes beyond just facades. And I think it's important that you get your hands dirty. And I think the best people in any industry, whether you come up through operations or procurement or finance or sales, that you learn about all of that stuff, because it's still a business, and knowing and understanding your business, I think, is the key. And I've been afforded that. So I don't know if I would give myself too much advice on that. I think looking back now that I've got a fair amount of gray hair, is I probably would tell myself, don't stress out so much about the things that, had kept you up late at night, because other than safety and construction, it really is not life or death.
Yeah. That's good, wise words. So, yeah, you've worked across design, ops, P&L, and delivery. Like you said, mentioned earlier, you've gone through all aspects of the business. What are the earliest indicators in drawings or coordination that you can tell when a facade package is going to either become a commercial or a program risk later on down the line?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that whether you're in facades or any other contracting, I think picking the right projects and picking the people to work with, and we don't always have that luxury, but if you get to the point where you at least can do that some of the time, I think eliminate some of that risk from the get-go. But I would say that early indicators include designs that are not only challenging, but that are not well conceived with respect to interfaces with waterproofing details and structure. And then, on top of that, we get a lot of broadly written scopes of work that don't really address some of those things. And so, the sort of some of the catch-all phrases that, regardless of what is said, you're responsible for. Those are the things that always get my spidey sense going, right? And then also, and going back to being somewhat selective with who you work with, whether it's a CM or a QS or an owner, that just they approach our trade because, and I mean, glass and glazing covers a tremendous amount of different types of projects, but in the kind of work where the entire facade, where the entire building envelope, they don't approach our trade. Some people that would approach our trade as just another trade, like drywall or flooring, always has me concerned, because there are a lot of things that can go wrong that have a huge sort of cascading domino effect impact on the project, because obviously nothing can happen on the inside of the building until the facade is what is starting to be enclosed.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing I would say is those projects that have just been sold with extremely ambitious schedules where everybody is sort of knows there's no way it's gonna work. And because let's face it, if you're behind the eight ball from the start, it's going to be extremely challenging to even get par.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the risk. So facade carries disproportionate risk. You've got your fire, your thermal performance, you've got tolerances, you've got interfaces, yet they're often value engineered late. So why do teams struggle to treat the building envelope as a system rather than a set of disconnected components? And what are the major benefits of having a facade on a building other than just aesthetics?
Well, you mentioned, I'll start with the second thing you asked first, Glenn, is obviously besides aesthetics, I mean, the facade is so important for for the thermal performance of the building. So performance for water management, in today's world, we're designing for blast, and we're designing for bullet resistance, and we're designing for social security. We're designing, sometimes we've done some work where we've designed for radio waves. Did some government work in here in the States where they're concerned about, radio waves and things. So
Mm.
the facade, and then obviously ventilation. So if you have operable windows or doors, the ability to egress and also to have some outdoor spaces become part of the live or work environment. But I think you're right. We do facades carry a disproportionate amount of risk, and if you talk to insurance companies, I think our trade has one of the highest default percentages of all the trades. There are a lot of facade contractors that they get out over their skis and get into trouble. But
Hmm.
the majority of the larger high profile projects that I've been fortunate to work on, we've had really good teams with architects, facade consultants, engaged owners. So in the specifications, there is a performance spec written around the facade, and there may be separate specifications for glass or, glass, aluminum framing, other materials that are incorporated into the facade, but there is a unifying sort of curtain wall performance specification, which then at least provides some semblance of scope and a roadmap that the construction manager or general contractor can at least follow. I think if, on the contrary, if you've got a project where there's all these different specifications but nothing unifying it, I think that's where sometimes, and you don't have a very good construction manager, or your construction management team hasn't done a lot of facades, they can sometimes start to botch the procurement process, and then
Yeah.
that sort of evolves into a problem. So I've been on a lot of discussions and a lot of panels as it relates to this topic, Glenn, and I think it is really the if you recognize that there is a lot of risk, and that the facade is being asked to do a lot, not only aesthetics but all the other things that we talked about, it's incumbent that the facade contractor becomes part of the team as early as possible. For
Yeah.
getting in too late usually is one of the things that can be a problem. Getting in too early. I've never heard anybody say they've gotten in too early, other than they
Yeah.
know too much and then the price goes up. But yeah.
Nice. Okay, with you've got design intent and versus install reality. There's a constant battle there. So, in your experience, how much of that conflict comes from people interpreting just 2D information differently, and where could better visualization earlier have changed the actual outcome?
Yeah,
Have you got?
I don't know if that's entirely true. Clearly, there are opportunities to interpret 2D a little bit differently, but we're seeing so many of the projects we see now do include an early model,
Yeah,
and so we can at least, and everybody has access to that early architectural model, so we can talk about it, and we've got some visualization there. I I think that's really the crux of it. Is I think though that more than people interpreting 2D information differently, I think that I think it's very incumbent upon the client that they do a proper scoping. So I know in the UK, obviously a lot of the projects are QS, but so it's very quantity based, and that's important. But more than the quantity based side of it, it's sort of a scope. It's a scope document here in the States, at least, that does talk about what the actual responsibilities are. Besides
Yeah.
making sure you got so many square meters of glass and so many square meters of architectural louvers in that. So I think there's a combination there. I think the fact that 3D technology has gotten to the fact where it's virtually on every project maybe eliminates some of that concern that you raised. But I
Hmm.
still think it goes back to the way that the project team purchases the facade, and those that are into it. I think, I would much rather have a much more precise scope of work and a precise proposal than sort of a loosey-goosey
Yeah.
award-based project.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I don't
bolting
know
on
if
to
I
that,
answered the question or not, but that's the
yeah.
best I have.
Well, bolting on to that question. So as the
Okay.
projects get taller, they get more complex. Do you think that traditional drawings, and I think I know the answer to this, but do you think traditional drawings and specs are still enough? Or are we reaching a point where you've got immersive and 3D environments, they start to become essential for decision making and stakeholder alignment?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the more that everybody can understand what's going on is, and especially, I think complex geometry is really the aspects of it. And I used to remark to some both peers and competitors that I knew that as buildings stopped becoming rectilinear, and a lot of it was, from my perspective in the United States, a lot of it was some of the European architecture that sort of came across the pond and came to the US. We were not prepared for the complexities of it. We could
Yeah.
we could visualize it, and we could intellectualize it, but when we actually had to execute it, I believe that we all fell a little short. It took a while for people to sort of grasp it. And now, with the fact that we can draw anything with all this technology, with this 3D technology, that not at least now we're also bidding on it off of 3D technology. So not only can we just draw it, but we can actually look at it, understand it, quantify it, discuss it, and then find solutions to make it a reality.
Nice. Nice. And if you had the opportunity, right, to redesign the early stage process entirely, what tools or workflows would you actually insist on having right at the beginning before contracts are signed to reduce that redesign disputes, cost leakage on those facade heavy developments?
Yeah, that's a lot of what I've talked to people about. And I think the good news is, Glenn, is that for a lot of projects, that is actually what's going on now. So I would say for projects that are not sort of plans and specs, bid build, but rather, design assist, delegated design, design build, we're finding that our workflow is actually getting managed much better. And a lot of that is just due to experience, because as more people have been involved in sort of this collaborative bidding structure, collaborative purchasing agreements. So I think we've established a pretty good process, but I think that the keys to that process is basically establishing a early design plan to understand critical path items as they relate to
Yeah.
schedule, as they relate to, and we'll talk to design teams about, as like, especially if we're designing to a price, like what are the sacred cows and what aren't, so we can understand that early on. We also
Hmm.
want to understand any materiality or any visual mock-ups that need to be larger, they need to be larger than, say, a tabletop, so that we can plan for that, and then understand what decisions are going to be made from that.
Yeah.
And then that helps understand, and then how that all plays into the overall construction schedules, milestone requirements for submissions. That's I think the second thing that happens is we discuss very early on about what is the expectations of this communication. Is it formal for a defined period of time? What is the cadence of that communication? And what's the process? Who's the sheriff in the room? Who's the final decision maker? And it can be any one of the stakeholders.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that the stakeholders have to be engaged,
Yeah.
or they at least have to be. If an owner isn't, if an owner says you're my owner's rep, you can make the decisions. That's great, but we have to have the stakeholders and the decision makers available. So when these decisions get made, they're not made. So there's very clear lines of communication.
Yeah.
They also have to get other trades involved when needed be. I'm on a project now in Los Angeles where it's very early on, but we've probably already engaged with 6 or 7 other trades, some of which weren't even purchased yet, but they were sort of the favorite, and they brought them in just because we were purchased early.
Mm-hmm.
So that was good. And then, like everybody says in any field, whether, be transparent in conversations, be open, be honest. And we try to let people know what decisions impact schedule, what decisions might impact supply chain,
Yeah.
what might impact fabrication, execution of or field execution. And I think it comes back to like kindergarten, just communicate, be nice, raise your hand when you have a problem.
Yeah.
But so I think the good news is I think more and more projects are sort of trying to take aspects of that model, but it still takes time. And then we've just had the experience of doing a lot of them, so we've refined our process, and we've learned, we have lessons learned that we can count on.
Yeah.
Experience.
Oh, excellent. That's brilliant. Jeff, thank you very much. Loved having you on the show. I've enjoyed the conversation on facades, and not just, it's not just the aesthetics. It's, all the other little bits like the radio waves thing. That was interesting. So once again, thanks to my listeners and viewers of YouTube as well. Jeff, before we sign off, if listeners or viewers, they want to get in contact with you, learn about what you offer at Island Facades, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Sure. So, Island Facades is a large North American-based facade contractor, and you can check us out at www.islandef.com, and you can get a hold of me at Heymann, Heymann at islandef.com. And I'd love to hear from anybody that is a subscriber or listener to your podcast, Glenn.
Brilliant. Well, I hope you do get someone. So that's it for today. And remember, this show is supported by a new prop tech tool that's redefining what visualization even means in property. The ones that are using it now are already pulling ahead. You've been listening to Blueprints to Buildings. I'm your podcast, Glenn. I was joined today by Jeff Heymann. Thanks again for listening and watching, and I see you on the next episode.